So reference signs can help us get an idea of how to compare things across groups, but they can also help us understand of how to compare things within groups. They can operate at multiple levels. So let's see an example of this in practice and learn how we can interpret it and help our users interpret it. So let's add a new sheet, and we're going to be doing ratings again, and again as a function of author to begin with, although we'll make it more complicated. So let's drag authors to, let's try rows this time, just to do something new. And again, you might want to do, for instance, names as the rows rather than columns, because it makes it easier for the user to read. It's also sometimes harder to interpret. So, it's not like one size fits all, but let's just kind of play around with these various things. We're also going to bring in ratings like we did last time. And ratings here are going to go in our columns. And remember, we don't want the sum of the ratings because some books have been, some authors in this case, have been reviewed much more than others. But let's go through and say the average instead. And what we found is that this really changes things in terms of what this looks like. There are no longer like enormously dominant authors and super weak authors. It's much more complicated. So at this point we could drop a reference line if we wanted to, but let's be a little bit more nuanced about it this time around than we were last time. So let's drop in the title of the book too. So let's break down the each author into the titles of the books that they've written. So for instance, Thompson has written 3 of these books, and notice that the sort is kind of off now, so let's sort it again so that each author is also sorted within their own group. So Thompson has written three books. They're all very well reviewed, but the question is, how well are they reviewed relative to one another? So if we go over here to analytics and we drop in a reference line, last time we did table, and if I'm going to do it real quick, don't follow if you don't want to. But this gives us the average across all of these, all of the authors and all of the books. That may not be what we want. So if we get rid of that, let's take a reference line and drop it across the pane. So here, this is like at this level of detail, at the author level of detail. So it's basically saying for each author, what is the average review across all of their books? But that average is different for each author. So notice that Thompson has a different average than Hay, has a different average than Carney, and so on and so on. And so you can ask questions like, which of Thompson's books were above average for Thompson? And in this case, Thompson only had one above average book for Thompson, the first one, and the second 2 were actually below average for Thompson. Whatever Thompson, however Thompson typically writes, those books were actually below average. And so you can start asking yourself, well, that's, what does this mean about how an author performs and how likely it is for the next book to be such and such? And then how these averages stack up over across each other. So my only point here is that there's multiple levels of detail that we can operate at, and breaking things down on finer and finer levels of detail is totally possible within Tableau, even if we have more levels. So for instance, if we broke this down into hardcover, softcover, or paperback, hardcover, or whatever the words you want to use, we could even say what's the average review of the paperback versus the hardcover. You can operate at kind of whatever level of detail you want. You just have to decide in a particular context what makes the most sense with respect to the story that you want to tell.